Check it out, Jeff.
I guess I'll do better if I'm not tethered. So a couple of things. I first got to say that I travel the world and I speak all over. You are the rowdiest bunch I ever get in front of. And I haven't been here yet tonight. You're just humming out there. You can take a break, you can't hear yourself think. It's got, I don't know what that's about. And then the other thing is, Tom, the last gentleman talking about 10-year rotations. At my age, you don't think in 10-year rotations, you think in 2-year rotations. Come on. Let's get real. I've been around for almost 3/4 of a century. You got to think about that. So 10 years, really. I evaluate projects differently, by the way. You get to be my age, you really got to focus on something else, and that is that I'm a health food kind of a nut, and not that I don't travel the world, eat everything, weird things, and so I found a doctor that I could go to. I go out to Colorado. I said, it's a 3-hour flight. My sister lives in Colorado, and it's an east-west clinic kind of a doctor guy. And so if you go to a doctor, you say, I'm here to interview you to see if I want to use you as my doctor. Now, they don't usually like that. And this guy was pretty good at it, interviewing. So anything, I had a really interesting conversation. I said, you don't tell me what goes in my body. I decide that. I just want your consulting advice. I don't want your opinion. I just want it to be wide and open. So it's kind of interesting. So I do, he said, I'm the first guy my age. He wanted to know what my eyes tested like. I said, I never had them checked. He said, what about yours? I never had them checked. And he said, no. And I said, well, I didn't say I could see or hear. I just never had them checked. Just like soil testing or plant testing, I kind of got to drag that out a ways. So the title here really is probably not, what it amounts to is that I have been involved in this since the 1960s, actually. I went to graduate school in Hawaii, and I got introduced at that time in the 1960s. I started a project in Hawaii. I'm a dairy nutritionist about feeding pineapple byproducts to dairy cows, and they started to abort. Insecticides they used on the pineapple were causing the cows to abort. And I just spent 9 years at the university, and I said, whoa, wait a minute, people are eating pineapples. Yeah, but they don't eat that much, they said. Oh, well, I said, yeah, but what about everything you put in your mouth? So I got introduced to chemistry back then as I shut the dairy industry in Hawaii down for 6 months because chemicals accumulate in fats. And those cows had to lose all that weight. They kept right on aborting, and we had terrible troubles. So Honolulu Star Bulletin headlines, 1971, dairy industry in Hawaii threatened. That was my graduate work. So now I'm back in Hawaii. The last 2 dairy farms in Hawaii, there were 135 of them at that time. Today there's 2 left. And now the Honolulu Star Bulletin said a while ago, Hawaii dairy nutrition graduate to be managing the last 2 farms in Hawaii. I haven't been there for 25 years. I don't know what they think. Anyway, I'm involved with the project. So I'm a dairy nutritionist. And so I got into soils to create better feed for dairy cows. In the 1970s, I was teaching at a technical college in Minnesota, and I had to teach soils, agronomy, farm finance. Now I write books on soils, but I'm trained as a dairy nutritionist. I'm self-taught in soils. So it's all, I had no bad habits from what I learned in school from soils. That was all on my own. But dairy nutrition, you'll see there's a lot of similar ground in that. So back then I had outside speakers come in, and that's how I got introduced kind of to soils and what soils were, because I had to teach classes in soils. So being an educator, I started business then in the early 80s. Several times in my career, I always said I was overeducated, not undertrained. I was on my path to get my PhD, and then I had troubles with those cows, and I had some other projects in graduate school. It just didn't make sense, so I said, I got to go do this stuff. I need a farm. And because I've been an educator my whole life and teaching at tech school, I have a business in biological farming. We started in the early 80s, and that's, we called it biological farming in the early 80s, and a lot of people say they call me the father of biological farming because I coined that term because I wanted the farmer to focus on the biology, not the chemistry. This is in 1980. And some people said, oh, we need more than that then. I said, yeah, but some of us have been this at a long time. And some said, who was your teacher? I said, books. There was nobody out here doing this back then. There were some pretty old, smart people way back in a century or so ago. They weren't as all dumb as you think. Some of these people weren't. And I read and studied them all. So anyway, this is my latest book that came out a year ago. I say the only thing that hasn't changed, and it is me. I'm still about the same as I was when I wrote the first book. First book came out in 2000. And at that time, there wasn't even any GMOs. We didn't talk about genetic modified plants. There was much more on chemistry and much more on biology and composting and all those kind of things in the new book. First book was 360 some pages, and you read a page a day and have a couple days off. Now it's 500, and I took several chapters out. But since the first book, I've been ripped around the planet. So I write like I talk, and it's kind of, I can't type, so I have to hand write them, so it is kind of interesting. My daughter, Leilani, she's got a Hawaiian name because that's where she was She was made in Hawaii but delivered in Wisconsin. So anyway, you understand that really well, okay? Oh gosh. So anyway, I call it the biological farming, and so it's really, that's what gets me all over the planet. And as I mentioned earlier, I was in business for quite a few years, and then our whole goal was I originally started out working right with dairy farms. Our company deserves the credit to take dairy nutrition to the soils. I spent 9 years at that university and never once asked the farmer or anybody how they grew the food. Whatever feed test we'd have, we would then put in a little computer, even back then, and we'd add what's short, and if it got too much, we'd dilute it down. I never once said, I don't like your feed, I want to change it. Until I got involved in this when I was teaching at the tech school. I said, oh my gosh, what would ideal feed for a dairy cow look like if we were going to make it? So when I started business, we had 10 dairy nutrition consultants, and we started working, we had 400 farms. They're all dairy. And so then after that, I met my goal. And my brother-in-law said, well, now what? And I said, I don't know. So a year later, I said, I'll never put myself in a box again as to what my limits are. I would now want to work at changing agriculture in the world, and that's part of why I travel the world. I can't do business all over the world. I got partners in South Africa. I got a huge project in Eastern Europe going on right now, a couple 100,000 acres, that is in switching to biological, and they're also talking about going to organic. 200,000 acres in Eastern Europe. So I was over there last fall, and they got American partners, and that's how I got involved. So then so I want to change agriculture in the world. That's why I had to write a book. And I said I have to have a farm, because I can stand here and talk all day long. If I don't do this myself, I don't have the credibility. Now, I bought a farm in 1991, and my son was 13 years old. When he was 16 years old, the farm came up for sale across the road, and he said, I want to buy it, and I want to milk cows. And I said, oh, kid, you're 16 years old. You can't be serious. Oh, he was. I let him buy the farm under the promise that he'd go on to school, and we were buying land for $1,000 an acre. I said, my son's the wealthiest man I know. He owns 5 farms today. We bought him for $1,000 an acre. Now they're worth $10,000 an acre. So he's only wealthy, like he says, if I cash in. What would he do then? So Otter Creek Organic Farm, we went organic on day one. He was 100% debt financed. I couldn't take that roller coaster. Now organic has its ups and downs too. We didn't always have markets. And we are a dairy farm. We're in the hills of southwestern Wisconsin. Has anybody been to Wisconsin? Not too many, few of you. Been to Wisconsin. I had field days the third Tuesday of August on our farm for 25 years, and it never once rained on us the third Tuesday in August. But I quit. Anyway, we have a dairy. My daughter now runs a dairy herd, and my son does the crops. We milk about 180 cows and farm about 1,500 acres. Just pitched that old cow right there. We were talking about cows and things. If you're into dairy cows, she was 17 years old before she checked out, and then gravity got her. Her udder got pulled closer to the earth, and she got mastitis. But anyway, she was 17 years old and had a lot of babies on her farm, and she was classified excellent. As of last April 1st, we took all the grain away from the cows. So now we're 100% forage dairy farm. I think if people A2 milk, 100% forages, there was nobody allergic to milk when I was a kid. I don't know what happened. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know. But I know one thing, that people want more foragers testing milk out here. The organic community, including the one in Europe, I work with that AMSCO group. They ship milk to America in England. And if they start testing the milk, you'll find out that all forage milk, just like all grass-fed beef, it's got different fatty acid profile. It's got a whole, the milk is totally different out of our all forage cows. And I'm not saying we get as much milk, but I like doing things that are difficult. So I actually want to work at trying to come up with a better way of having cows produce more milk. We can keep them healthy, but we can't get the production on all forages. So then I spent my career on this feed test right here, and I'm not going to go through this whole thing. That's about as good as a feed test as you're ever going to find on a piece of paper. Now, this is our report card. Our soil test is our project. Now, feed testing is feed testing, and there's lots of variables involved with it. But not only is it high in digestibility, and it's a high quality, and it's got the right nitrogen to sulfur ratio, but we're dairy people at the mineral levels. So I tell people, I'll bring this up a little bit later here. First of all, it's like everything else, we were talking about health. Normal alfalfa has about 2.5% fat. This is 4. Plants are no different than animals. If it's feeling really good and it's doing really well, it puts on more fat. Why wouldn't it? So that's energy. If you're going to go to all forage diet, you'd want to have to pay attention to that. The mineral levels in here, calcium's got some grass in it, so it's hard to measure. But phosphorus, we were all talking about mycorrhizae, phosphorus, and all these things this morning. Joel was mentioning that stuff. I said, what's the best measure of it? Soil structure could be a good measure. How about phosphorus uptake? If I double the phosphorus uptake, I can't get it through chemistry. If I can double it, that means the guy that buys phosphorus and dumps on his land, he can't double it. You're a farmer out here right now, and you're conventional, and you're buying commercial phosphorus. Double your phosphorus uptake in your crop. I want to see you do it. You're not going to get there through chemistry. I don't care how much money you got, I don't care how much you dump on the land, you're not going to take up anymore. The only way to get more is through biology. That's double the average level. We have not supplemented our cows for phosphorus for 10 years. And so some of these numbers on your magnesium is really high. You can't get that really high either, because if you get high potassium, your magnesium goes down. So this whole thing about testing, or just another one, your manganese. See, my dad always fed oats to cattle to get more manganese. That's really a health issue. If you look at our salt test, it says we're really low on manganese. But my feed tests say I'm really high. If you just took your salt test and you'd go out and buy manganese, that'd be a terrible mistake. That's double the manganese levels. And the other thing, if you looked at my farm, if you really honestly wanted to follow this feed test and use this as a tissue test, we're really low in sodium and chloride, salt. I should be dumping salt on the land, but gosh, I got enough things to explain without start putting salt out there, and I got to explain why I'm putting salt out there. But we force feed 4 ounces of salt to cows a day, and they free choice another 4. So that's just unusual, because we don't use salt fertilizers. We don't have any salt. We need salt. So I want to go through this whole thing, seeing I'm a dairy nutritionist and how this came about. These two systems are almost identical. And I'm the one that kind of brought that kind of forth. So if we go back 40 years ago, how did we feed cows? Well, some dry hay made about the 4th of July, some cob corn, some dicel, some trace mineral salt. We got about 40 pounds of milk. How do we feed them today? Oh, we got TMRs. We mix everything together because the bugs that live on corn don't live on hay. We want to get maximum efficiency. We got bypass proteins, chelated trace minerals, probiotics, analytic salts, 7 or 8 different commodities, and the list goes on, and we doubled our milk production in the last 40 years. Now, you got to be careful, because a lot of guys killed their cows doing it. You can push them over the edge. So here's what's happening in the world today. I spoke at Cambridge University a couple years ago at a think tank group on sustainability. First, I got up and said, I don't like the word sustainable. Why would you want to sustain a mess? Can't we fix it? That didn't go over real well. I'm at a sustainable ag conference. The second thing is, I told the researchers is ridiculous. I said, you're worried about feeding all these millions of people. First of all, people that need food can't afford it, and they're going to shoot one another anyway. I got off a really bad start, I can tell you that much. Then I said to the professors, your research is useless, because you all got a different base. You're going to hear from me today. We're in a new century. We have now got soils figured out. As best I've ever seen in my life, we understand chemistry. Joel went through some of that thing. We understand biology, and we understand the physical properties. So if every researcher should have the same base, and then and only then is his research of any value. I'm at a Cambridge University telling my story. Guess what? Didn't go over real well either. But the truth of the matter is their research to me is useless, because they're doing research on, I was in Ohio last week at a bunch of, it was an organic conference. There was a whole bunch of university researchers there. And they were trying to do research on calcium and magnesium to figure out if these ratios really make a difference. I said, come on. We don't just farm to get a perfect looking salt test. How are you doing calcium, magnesium? Your phosphorus is too low to make any difference. And so you can't, how are you going to do research unless we do the whole system? They said, well, we can't have all those variables. I said, no, one variable, your system against mine. That's the only variable there is. And then they roll back and they said, well, you can't do that. And I said, I sure can. Why wouldn't we do research that way? So what was this like 40 years ago? NPK and lime to a 6.5 pH. What's different? Nothing. And we have now the capability of doubling yields. We have that capability. So I had some corn on our farm, maize or corn. You guys call it corn or maize? Maize. Okay. Lucerne or alfalfa? Lucerne. So we got maize and lucerne. Okay, I'll get it. I'll get it figured out where I am. And so anyway, I was going with that. The corn out, we had a field on our farm that made 8 tons per acre of maize grain. This is compared to, it was a variety trial from the genetics from the 1990s. And it was double the yield that the seed corn farms had. There's somebody now who has grown over 12 tons of maize shell corn per acre. And our state averages are probably around 5. So we can more than double. But you got to be careful. You can do that. You can buy your production too. This is what I'm going to get at. So right now, look at all the things we can do with this soil. Aren't we going to do the same? What are they talking about? Oh, we got to have a cocktail mix. These two systems are almost identical. Here we balance energy to protein. Over there we balance nitrogen to carbon. Over here we feed them, and over here we put residues and cover crops back in the soil. Aren't we just still feeding them? Oh, you got to have a 7-way or 9-way cocktail mix. What did I say? We feed 6 or 7 commodities over here. But the minerals, these guys feed a pound of mineral a cow a day. bypass proteins, different types of minerals, bypass chelated trace minerals, and they got regular trace minerals, and they got all different kinds of methods. We don't just deliver one kind of mineral. So if you look at what's going to happen over here, it's the same thing that's already been done over here. So, been figured out. See, I got involved in this, and I just use this as an example. This is not a small study, and we can't repeat it, because I was telling the guys at lunch, one of the big damaging things of the last century was we had a feed test that was in flaw. Dan Kittrick, I know him quite well. He was one of our trained consultants, the guy upstairs speaking, and he's got this little piece of equipment developed to measure nutrient density in food. And I'm scared, because that dumb thing, we had a feed test that was in flaw. You know what the feed test in flaw did? It took grasses out of alfalfa. First time I came to Ireland was Northern Ireland on a seed buying trip 20 years ago. We don't grow grasses in America because it got to be pure alfalfa because the feed test discriminated against grass. So the farmers took it out of their hay. Now they're putting it back, and the farmers, it's going to take them 3 generations to figure out that the professors want it back in again. They got a new feed test, but technology is never, people don't always keep up the technology. So this is 20,000 feed samples. These are 20,000 conventional samples, and these are 300 good biological farms. And you were taught that if your pH is fine, you get all the calcium you can have. We both have the same pH, but I got 47% more calcium. That's why I came up with the phrase, calcium's the trucker of all minerals and boron's the steering wheel. And now they say silica's the road and sulfur is the key switch. I don't know. So if your pH being fine, you don't get any more calcium. Calcium's king of this show. Calcium's king of the show. Not just having a pretty looking salt test, but having it exchangeable. There's another word, digestibility and exchangeability, the stuff that we're going to use as dairy farmers. Look at phosphorus. That's the hardest mineral you ever get into a plant. Magnesium, that went up easy because we didn't put any potash on and they did, but we got more potassium than they did, and we're not the ones that bought it. Because we had this huge reserve, and so I did my graduate work on sulfur, and so sulfur is easy to get into a plant, but I can change feed. So what would it look like? That's pretty impressive looking feed. So, I know, how many dairy farmers are even in here? Let's start there. Somebody better raise your hand. Well, thank you. Some hands. I come to America, boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got rid of 500 in the state of Wisconsin this last year, and the year's not over. Boy, they're dropping like flies. And we get these big farms out here, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's why the organic movement's real in America. We import 56% of our organic food. It's not grown in North America. And the consumer is nervous because there's such a variation between a family farm and a mega farm. It's huge. Drive through Iowa in the summertime, take a vacation, and get a gas mask before you start out because you're going to need it because you can't breathe. You go miles and miles where there's just no fresh air. Now picture yourself being an animal in a feedlot, not breathing. I don't care if you guys are dairy people. Now I don't care if you're growing vegetables, grain, whatever you're doing. If you're taking a tissue test, you get that thing really high in those 4 minerals. It'll be the highest quality, best looking feeds that I go after instead of coming up with a magical test that measures nutritional density. Why not come up with indicators? If your calcium is really high, you had to do something besides get the right pH. First of all, you probably also had to use boron because they go together. So calcium just isn't magically put on. The other thing is if you're a conventional farmer and you're putting on chloride, salt fertilizers, and you're putting on excess nitrogen, you're forming calcium chloride and calcium nitrate, and you're not going to get calcium uptake. See, there's an exchangeable calcium and there's a reserve calcium. So you can do calcium's easy to get rid of. So if you've got high calcium, if your plants are taking really up high calcium, I can tell you how you farm. I don't even need to be to your farm. What about phosphorus? Hardest mineral to ever get in a plant. If I go to your place and you've doubled the phosphorus, you have to have mycorrhizae. You have to have biology because you can't get the two chemistry. And so phosphorus is another indicator. So whatever feed, I went to a conference out in Idaho and the guy, because they got 9 pHs, 8.5, 9 pHs, really high pHs. And then phosphorus is almost impossible to get into a plant because it ties up so fast in the soil. And those high pHs, you have a hard time with mycorrhizae surviving. And I went to his farm and he handed me a petio test on potatoes. So I'm no potato. Actually, I do a lot of work in potatoes. I shouldn't say that I'm not an expert at it. I claim not to be one. Anyway, I looked at it and I said, what are you doing? And he said, why? And I said, because you've got the highest phosphorus I've ever seen recorded on a potato in the state of Idaho. And he said, you come out to my farm next summer, I'll show you. And I drove out there. I did learn some really interesting things. He was eccentric, but he didn't want anybody to know because people laughed at him. Highest quality seed potatoes in the state of Idaho he grows. So anyway, he had really high phosphorus. Now, if your pHs are really high or really low, it's extremely difficult. So now if you got that really high, I don't care if you're growing wheat or whatever you're doing, go after that thing. That tells you something. That's a really good indicator. And magnesium's another one because if you got too much potassium, magnesium's hard to get in a plant. And someone said, well, I did my graduate work on sulfur. They said, why don't you have sulfur? I said, because you can't get magnesium without sulfur. If you want to get more magnesium uptake, you put on sulfur, you make Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate. you want to get more magnesium, you got to use sulfur. So if you're not using sulfur, you can't get more magnesium uptake, and if you're putting on commercial potash, you're not going to get magnesium uptake. So those are really wonderful indicators of quality. And then the boron I have up here, because boron is highly leachable, and boron sugar translocation, it's pollination, it's energy, and it also has to do with getting calcium into the plant. So this little bit of things about our farm, and someone was talking about, see, I gotta have controversy or I wouldn't do any good. It came all the way over and up in a little controversy. See, I'm not really big into no-till. No-till is a method of planting, not a method of farming. And it's like putting the feed on the other side of the fence for your livestock. It's standing up here and your livestock are down there. So now, well, you know, if you're not gonna feed them, wouldn't that be just torturing your cattle if you left the feed on the other side of the fence? Put the electric fence up and not let them have it? So the feed's standing up here, you think the little bacteria are gonna jump out of the soil and suck it down? Are you serious? So I'm a real believer in shallow incorporating residues. Now, what's shallow? See that? This was a canning factory green bean crop that they passed up on. They had us plant them too early. We quit. We're at the canning factory. So it was just mostly a weed patch. And so we actually get tillage equipment from around the world. I've sold a lot of Lemken disc, comes out of Germany in America. Oh gosh, I started them and I probably got 100 of them. I know have already been sold. I never got a penny. I got a coat for last Christmas. Lemken did really well. Lemken's now bought a cultivator company, because herbicides no longer work. They didn't get it for organic farmers. They're going to build cultivators for conventional farmers. You can spray 10 times more chemicals than you used to spray, and you can't, some weeds you're not going to kill. So anyway, I'm taking that down, and see, I'm shallow. There's a lot of residues on top. How would you farm that? And so if you look at it, some things, I'll talk about regenerative and some of the things out here, so I got to manage that cover crop somehow. So we shallow incorporate. We waited a little while. We put some more back in, then we put another cover crop in here. And just like this here, you see, you're going to see some of my methods of farming. See, if you're going to organic, you got 36 months before you're certified since the last prohibited substance. That's 2 growing seasons usually. Those 2 growing seasons, we do not sell anything off our farm. We just do soil building. And we're tight old Germans, so the cheapest thing you can put out there is oats and clover and alfalfa. So we plant oats, underseed it with clover and alfalfa. Maybe some grasses come back in there. And someone say, oh, how come, what about an 8-way cocktail mix? I took off some yellow peas this year. We just drilled it, nothing but clover and radish. Because we got weeds and other things that'll grow. Volunteer oats comes back. And so we get our cocktail mix without having to buy it because we're organic. Think about that. Weeds. Why do they have to be, can't I use a brassica weed? So anyway, this year that we might combine oats because I had to feed some people wanted some of our oats. Otherwise, we worked that right back into the soil. And you can see the following spring, it looks like this. And so then everything that clover and the alfalfa comes back up. Now what I'm going to talk to you about is that, see, we do this for 2 years. In the end of 2 years, you will not recognize the soil I started with. If I set you out at the beginning and you went back 2 years and you said, this can't be the same field, because in 2 years, see, the crust is not on the earth, the crust is between your ears. That's 6 inches. The crust is what's really getting you. And so it's about the thinking. So in those 2 times, how can you afford to do that? We got 300 acres in transition right now. No income for 2 years. Well, that's good. We farm 1,500. That'll be 15. The next year it's organic. And like this field here then was corn. See, now we're actually taking, instead of, we make money on corn. Maize is our big crop. Alfalfa, lucerne. We make money on. We do soybeans. And we do the odds and ends. But yellow peas might do all right once in a while. Canning factory crops once in a while. So if we're going to lose money on a crop, we'd rather not make any money at all and turn it into a soil building year. What's wrong with my rotation? And I'll show you some pictures here of a potato farmer. He's going to be speaking at Acres Conference in the USA if anybody goes to that conference ever this year. 1 year soil building, 1 year potatoes. 1 year soil building, 1 year potatoes. The other farmer puts potatoes every 4 years. He's every other year. Same thing here. This here was not much of a crop, so why not just take a year off and build soils? That's our approach. This is a certified organic next year, and you can see that's got the brown in there. The picture's not real clear. The light's kind of probably helped if they were down, but that's the same way. So then we'll work that back in the ground, or next spring when that comes back up. This will be next year, will be into organic. You got through 2 years of soil building, and so we'll grow maize on it the first year. This will be seed corn. We'll net $2,000 an acre our first year of organic. They didn't make any money for 2 years. We make it all back up in 2. See, otherwise, people continue to farm what they've been doing, and when it's organic, they've already haven't fixed their soil, they haven't got it better, and they've been growing non-profit crops in the process. I had a young lady from the Czech Republic over for 90 days, that's the Eastern Europe group, in training. And we soil sampled this farm. I should have taken more pictures. This is one we just took on this last year. And this is this was just taken a little while ago. After one dose of cover crops, we went around in the spring with a shovel. She was with me and looking at soil structure. It was our first year farming it. We couldn't find a worm. And now this fall, I had a bunch of people out there dipped over one shovel. We're counting as many as 20 worms in one shovel. And there wasn't a single one we could find this spring. Where'd they come from? Were they in that oats I bought? Or are they sitting around waiting for the right opportunity to flourish? Now, having said that, you can see that how we would take these down. You see, we feed our soil. If I'm going to get any message across today, if you're not a dairy person, become one. We feed our soil like we feed cows. If you're growing a legume, we feed it like you feed a dry cow. If you're going to grow small grain, wheat, or you're going to grow maize, you feed it like a cow giving 100 pounds of milk. If you're going to feed the soil this, see, what's known about biology, and Joe and all these numbers and all those things are known about biology, what's understood about biology, I don't know anything about biology. I'm not going to measure biology. It's impossible. They discovered about 4 new antibiotics coming out of the soil right now. Did you know that? You know how they do it? By not taking a soil sample. Because the minute it hits air, it completely changes. The time you get it to the lab, it's a different test than you already started with. And if it changes before or after a rain, before I put my cover crop in the ground or after, when do you want to do my soil biology test? I can do it every day of the year, just like a water-soluble test, and they change. So I don't have to really do that out here, but so all I have to look at, I figured out something by accident or hook or crook, or I listen to the right people, that what you feed them is based on who you get. Us dairy people know that the bugs that live on corn don't live on hay. And that's why we got a TMR and mix them all together. Otherwise, the bugs that live on corn got it easy to eat corn. It's hard to eat hay. You chew on hay for a while, see how well you do. So, if you're going to take that and put that back in the soil like you're doing, what do you think we're going to grow? A maize crop. Because now we're going to give it tons of soluble nutrients. I saw someone mention nitrous oxide. They're going to measure nitrous. I'm scared, you see, because we had an 8-ton maize crop, an acre, and they want to come out and do nitrous oxide studies on my farm, and I refused to let them do it because we did soil tests, and I measured what was going back in the soil. We started the growing season with over 300 units per acre on an organic farm, and we don't buy a single pound. If I'm worried about, it's not purchased nitrogen, but it's nitrogen that we have on the farm that we grew, or we get it through biology. Because we learn how, when you feed that to the soil, you're feeding bacteria. And bacteria got a real high nitrogen to carbon ratio. So they're just loaded, and they get the nitrogen somewhere. So I actually went, years ago, Jerry Hatfield's the Ames, Iowa, USDA researcher, and him and Christine Jones out of Australia, the only two people that ever got to the agreement that I grew 6 grass crops in a row. 6. And cows were grazing on it in between. You could not even see where a cow pie fell. There was dark, bright green after 6 grass crops in a row. And I said, can I quit now? I want to change this rotation. They said, first year, well, you're just scrounging the nitrogen that's left over. Now, 6 grass crops in a row, I'm sorry. Your scrounging had to end somewhere along the line. How much more can I keep scrounging? I was growing the nitrogen, is what they didn't understand. And I was doing it through grass. Because grass, young succulent plants that give 100 pounds of milk don't have to be lucerne. You get a lot of them. You guys grow ryegrass. I can take that same ryegrass. It'll feed the same bacteria as long as it's highly digestible and young and succulent. And it's the same thing as a cow would give 100 pounds of milk. That's my son. I don't know if it shows up real well. That's a rye. And we had to mow it because we didn't have a lemkin at the time. Now we can go right through it. And the rye is this tall and it's all headed out. People say, oh, go in there and get that rye really big and then go plant some corn in there. It'll be a failure because it's fungal food. Once it gets mature, it doesn't feed bacteria and takes soil life eats first. So we've learned through management how to manipulate biology. We're not knowing what biology it is because we aren't going to ever figure that all out. Come on. This is one of our maize crops on our farm. I just wanted to show you it's just quite different. This is irrigated. Yeah, and I didn't need it this last year. We got double the rainfall than normal. Whew. We had 10 inches of rain in one day. Never seen it before like that in my life. Boy, you couldn't build boats fast enough. This corn, I had put a pivot system in, and the guy that sold me the irrigation rig stopped in, and he said, he said, you didn't tell me. He said, I'm afraid you're going to roll my irrigation rigs over. The corn had buried the irrigation rigs. They were under corn. Maize had grown taller. So we interseeded it. Come on. It came up, but it didn't really work. Interseeding works for conventional farmers on maize, does not work for organic farmers. Number one, we plant later. And we cultivate all the way up to the corn is knee high. If you're going to put a companion crop on maize, see, like we'll do it on our oats, we'll do it on our wheat, we bulk spread it like winter wheat. On our rye, we'll bulk spread clover in the springtime on frozen ground. Because then we've interseeded into the crop that's already got a head start. Here, trying to interseed it, we got a cocktail mix in there. Wow, wasn't worth leaving. Because this corn really shades it out. And we have water, because a lot of times it gets dry. Time we get our cover crop planted, it's the middle of June. By then it might be in the middle of a drought. But we had water on this field and we still couldn't get them to grow. Yeah, that helps. So then we also do rye. Now we don't drive real straight, but outside of that. This farm was in transition, and it's kind of interesting. I took this farm here, and we grow rye for our own seed. Rye seed is in pretty good demand because a lot of guys are looking at cover crops now. And I transitioned. This one here, we did grow rye in transition. I bought this farm as one of those farms that I bought a midnight special, and it's right across the road from a big project. Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architect, Taliesin, if you're familiar with the architectural world. We rent that farm, and I'm on the board there, and we're starting agritourism right now. And I bought this farm across the road and put conservation easements on it. And the guy that had been running it quit growing soybeans and started growing corn on corn on corn. And then I got back, the pHs were down to 5. So guess what we planted? Blueberries. I'm leaving some of that land acid for a real good reason. We got the only blueberry farm. The government subsidized liming for 50 years, and the old man I bought it from, he was 90 years old before he passed away. He must have never tapped into government programs. We don't either. We don't farm the government. So that's why I was showing you this right here. See, now the other thing is this, which you can tell. If you come to my farm and someone says, you go out and you dig around and you'll see there's a really interesting story. Look at that. Someone says, my gosh, our neighbor stopped in and said, you can't tear that alfalfa up. Oh, we run a real tight rotation. 1 year hay, the seeding year only on our good flatland. We seed it in the spring with winter wheat as a nurse crop, because the winter wheat planted in the spring only gets so tall in our country and it stops growing. The summer heat takes it out. And then we got 4 cuttings of hay that year. Next spring, when the lucerne gets that tall, we turn it back in the ground and plant corn. So everybody says, oh my gosh, that's really, I buy the best genetics you can buy too. We don't buy cheap seed because that's my fertilizer, that's my corn crop, that's my 200 bushel corn crop you're looking at. So now with that, I tell people, earlier you saw, I showed you those earthworms out here, because see, we plant oats, so we had this complex crop. Kerry Reams, anybody know who Kerry Reams was? You ever read Kerry Reams years ago? He says, my head's bobbing. Is that Kerry Reams was in the biological farming. He was one of the, I studied his stuff back from the 40s, 100 years ago. Anyway, Kerry Reams was more into energies and frequencies. He was a medical doctor out of Florida. But anyway, he said if your farm is really active and really working well, you won't have very many earthworms. You know what? When we used to have 600, we had 300 cows and 600 acres. We chopped all the straw, went for bedding, all the corn stalks, all the maize stalks got taken home for bedding, because we had cattle everywhere. We left nothing complex out in the field. We had made 5 cuttings of hay a year. We were intensive managers. And I didn't see any earthworms, hardly any. The minute we started leaving all the corn stalks out there, about 4 years ago now, and we started leaving all the straw out there, I found to buy something, we're going to buy straw. Now, we have to use organic straw in America, and you guys can cheat in this country. If you're going to sell it to America, you can get away with it until I get it stopped. Oh. Cows eat straw. Come on, let's get serious. I can use conventional. The guys in England use conventional straw, and I'm trying to get it stopped because they're shipping milk to America. Competition's always good for us. That keeps everybody just a little bit honest. So anyway, because I worked that back in the ground. If I fed that to a cow, it completely goes squirting out the back end in about 3 hours. If I put that back in the soil and you come to my farm a week later, you will not know what that crop was. It's already digested. Everybody said the soil life eats first, and the bacteria are going to chew that right up really fast because it's highly digestible. So you got to get the word digestibility in your sentence if you're going to be looking at cover crops and managing land. How else you're going to have to buy commercial fertilizer. I had a guy the other day said, I said, we got that tall rye. He said, we still run a moldboard plow. We plow it under and plant corn. We get really good corn. I said, how much nitrogen you putting on? He said, he said, we do 150 units a hen. Well, I said, I put on 0. Why don't you try 0 and see how well you do? Your corn will be yellow all year. We grow seed corn for the seed maize, seed corn. I like doing things really hard. That's why we're taking the grain away from the cows and growing seed corn. And I do this because everybody tells me, by now you got to recognize we're intensive managers and we refuse to take less yield than conventional. So I had this seed corn, and there was a big company from the States and seed corn, and so I grow for a company. And I was out there one day, and there were several guys walking around this field, and I went out there, and they had seed jackets on. I could tell what companies we grow for. Otherwise, we don't know who we're growing for. And it was a variety out of Ohio that we were growing for it, and they were taking pictures, and I didn't know. I was our first year growing seed corn. We were doing it a couple years, and then when we went to harvest it, we had within the top 10% of the yield with that variety, both compared to conventional and organic, and we had the highest quality going into the seed company. The guy that runs the seed company, the son, who's 30 years old, wants to do organic, and the dad, who's my age, thinks organic's a joke. When our corn came in, the son got the dad out there and said, you got to come and take a look. They came down, they got about 50 Hispanics on the line throwing out the bad corn. They're on break when our corn went through the plant. They couldn't find any bad corn. So anyway, the dad says, wow, where'd this all come from? So then I said, we would have had the highest yield, but see, we got 2 males, and conventional guys, they only let them have 1 male. And I said, why do we have to have 2 and the conventional guys 1? Well, because you're organic. And then I get annoyed. Why would you penalize me because I'm organic? And so that took 20% of our yield away. So our contracts for 40 bushel corn, and that was 83. So we doubled our contract. That's why it's a $3,000 an acre crop for us. And it's really challenging. This last year we had troubles with weather, but anyway, and then we grow some soybeans, and we plant our soybeans quite late. Does anybody grow soybeans in this part of the world? Anybody grow soybeans at all around here? It's not. That's a nice crop of soybeans. Let's see, that would have been about 2.5 tons an acre. So it was a nice bean crop. And that's hard to control weeds in them. That's a challenge on our farms. And then we have a vegetable operation, and we do that and gardeners. We have 35 acres of vegetables. I should be upstairs listening to those guys, right? Anyway, our 35 acres of vegetables is not really true. We only have about 15 acres of vegetables. We have 35 acres of land set aside for vegetables. If you're going to grow something that's that high return and that costly, so that's why I tell people, if you're going to do that, see, it's 1 year soil building and 1 year production. This is not the soil building. This is Virginia. Ellen Polachek just wrote a book about starting a farm, and she did $1 million CSA outside of Washington, D.C., and so they got clover interseeded, and I think that's, I forgot what crop that was right now. It's what happens. You get old. It just jumped out of my head. Anyway, so then you put all the minerals out there, and you do the soil building, and then you do that whole, and next year, 1 year soil building, 1 year crop. 1 year soil building, 1 year crop. If you're going to grow a high return crop, and you want to cut down your work and your expenses and get something really healthy, you can't farm it every year. You just can't. It's just too hard. It's too expensive. Why would you do that to yourself? Well, anyway, Midwestern BioAg is a company I founded in 1993 because I couldn't get the fertilizer and nutrients that I wanted. I was trained as a Brookside consultant, Dr. Albrecht's work. We're really quite strong in the upper Midwest. That's Wisconsin, if you want to know where I'm from. That's where I live, right there in southwestern Wisconsin, and we probably have about 1 million acres, and about 25% of our customers are organic, mainly because I farm organically, and it's dragged. We have a high base of organic farms. Only 5% of the land is farmed organically in North America. This is Robbie's. Thought I'd just show it to see if he was going to show the same picture. I really liked it. I stole that from him a couple years ago, and he probably didn't even know it. I still use it. Biological farming is really an approach to food production that respects the natural process of the farm in order to yield top quality products, provide a viable living for the producer, is the part we seem to keep forget, and we got to have a long-term productivity. Biological farming also understands the necessary that balanced relationship you've been hearing about all day, the 3 parts of the stool, the physical, the chemical, and the biological. And if you're biodynamic, there's 4 legs on your stool. You're one of them. Your mind, you're the center of your farm. It's an emotional kind of aspect to it. So I don't know how many people are biodynamic, but if I bring that up in my country, they kind of laugh at me. I can bring it up over here because I'm leaving Friday anyway. Oh, you think I'm crazy, right? So biological really is about carbon sequestering. I'm involved with carbon sequestering projects. That's right. How are you measuring soil biology? You don't need to. It's too complex. You'll never get it figured out, and the tests are going to be wrong. Because like I said, the minute you hit air, they're going to be different. So how am I going to measure if you're sequestering carbon or not? It's really simple. All I got to do is measure how much nitrogen you're using. We did a big study out of Clemson University, spent a lot of money, review all the literature. So big food companies that want to sequester carbon and want to make them feel good. See, the food companies are getting in agriculture, whether you like it or not. I was telling people, I was at a conference in London about 3 years ago, sat in an office in London with global positioning and satellites and imagery. They're going to try to predict yields. So the food companies will then know if there's going to be a shortage of potatoes, they can buy them ahead of time. You won't know it, but they will, in the world. So I'm sitting in an office in London, and he had this global positioning, and he picked out the highest quality potatoes going into Frito-Lay's, and it's one of my customers in Michigan. They picked it on a satellite imagery, sitting in an office in London. I said, wow, kind of scary. I don't know if they're watching me or not. But carbon sequestering is all about nitrogen. It's all about nitrogen. See, when I was a kid, they started using commercial fertilizers and chemicals came along. And boy, put fertilizer on, you know, pick out a good and a bad farmer driving down the road. Well, you can do that organically now. But the chemicals made everybody look good. Doesn't mean they were good. Didn't mean they did a good job of their soils. Everything got green and tall. So I said, when I was a kid, oh, corn's going to go really get tall. And look at all that biomass. We're going to really raise organic matter. 40 years later, we cut it in half. It's all nitrogen. Then they say, oh, it's all tillage. Oh, no. University of Wisconsin just finished a 20-year study on no-till. It did not increase carbon, not one speck, because it's all nitrogen. So no-till didn't do it either, because it's all balancing carbon to nitrogen ratios. You're going to burn up carbon based on how much nitrogen you put on. It's really that simple. So carbon sequestering is a part of it. Energy savings. We did a complete study on soil conservation. I don't need near the disasters on my crops. I don't have I got much higher levels of nutrition, and I got better human health, and I got more profit. That's really what it's all about. So we can demonstrate all those things are measurable. So biological farming really, in the summary, is doing everything you can to get those soils healthy and mineralized. And we don't skimp on that. You see, that's why when we start out, we had another 100 acres we took on this last year to transition. We take a soil test, and we just dump it out there. Put everything on. Oh, someone says, oh, you got to put calcium on first and then phosphorus. Nah, just dump it out there and start growing cover crops. Start growing crops and start getting it into a carbon biological cycle. What's wrong with conventional agriculture? The minerals are not in a carbon biological cycle. They're in chemistry. You dump out your fertilizers, and you hope the plant can get it. You saw, I don't know if that was Joe's, what small percentage of the crop actually is sucking up these minerals, phosphorus, 15 to 20% of what they buy. And yet I go to farmers and they said, oh, we know how much phosphorus it takes to grow my crop. And I say, yeah, but you're only using 10% what you put on. How would you know that? You're putting on this much. They say it's hard to get them to back down because someone got in their head that they have to put on this much phosphorus to grow this crop. So we do everything we can to get healthy and mineralized. So if I dump those minerals out there, they're not plant available. We're organic. They're all just natural rocks from mines. So then, when we start growing the cover crops to get the biology going, then and only then, that's why the 2-year transition makes a lot of sense, because I got to get these things cycling. And that is why you got to be careful on the soil tests, and that is why, just like a biological test, because it depends upon. Where are your minerals? Where are they? I want them in biology and carbon. They're not going to necessarily show up on a soil test. I'm a soils guy. Yeah, and just like this one here, is Midwestern Bio, there's my company, there's Monsanto BioAg. Now that name is going to go away. When I was at that conference at Cambridge, Mr. Bear was on the same panel I was, and I got all done with my little speeches, and Mr. Bear said, well, that's really nice, Mr. Zimmer, but our farmers in England can't afford to do what you're doing. And I said, it's really simple. Either they do what I'm going to do, or you take all their check. And when you take their check, you never make it better for next year, and I do. The whole crowd cracked up laughing because Mr. Bear got done. We had 5 minutes at the end. He gave a 5-minute dissertation I wish I had a copy of. It's the future of Bayer Chemical Company. They bought Monsanto. And Monsanto name is going to go away. There's 1,000 lawsuits against it. They lost that big cancer suit now for $280 million. The judge reduced it. Now there's 1,000 lawsuits on cancer. It's not as nice as people think it is. So they literally, if you go to their website, they literally copied me. Well, what am I supposed to do, sue Monsanto? But I said, what? How many in here really think that your limiting factor on your farm is a bug full of jugs? A jug full of bugs. Did it backwards, didn't I? I'm dyslexic here. So they're going to sell you. And what's really interesting, if you think about it, they go out to the land on guys that grow really good crops, and they measure the bugs, and they figure out what bugs are in there on really good crops, and they isolate those and sell them back to you. They came from the land, and you're buying them back, and you could just as well grow them as them. If you're going to spend $15 to $20 an acre to buy their bugs back, I'd suggest you need to go see a psychiatrist. I'm not interested in buying, I'm not saying I don't inoculate my crops, but soybeans are a legume and they need to be inoculated. So one of the workers on our farm, we planted some soybeans on land that had been insecticide for 25 years. We used to not grow soybeans in Wisconsin. Now they got them to grow them way up in Canada because they weren't growing that far north. And forgot to get inoculated. And guess what? They got nodules on the roots. And there's never been soybeans ever grown, ever, on that piece of land. So where did they come from? An elm tree dries and morel mushrooms start to grow. How did those spores get there? Are they everywhere? So I'm not big on adding the bugs anyway. Now, I know this looks a little confusing. This is my slide that indicates that we have it all figured out. This is from South Africa. I got partners in South Africa. I might show some pictures tomorrow morning about South Africa. It's really, really interesting what we did in South Africa. We cut their commercial fertilizer in half, and cut their grain in half. They milk 70,000 cows. There's 1,000 farms, 70 farms with 1,000 cows each. And now they're building another 10,000 cow dairy farm in Zimbabwe. The Chinese are building the dairy farm. Mr. Trump may think he can bully the Chinese around, but I know what they're up to. They're in Africa buying Africa. Not to feed Africans, by the way. This is called the theory of constraints. And Eli Goldrath from Israel or something, wherever he's from, and it's about, he's a financial guru guy. See that little tube going down the middle? That's your output. See, maize, if you buy maize, does anybody plant maize in here? Some of you plant maize, some of you do? A few of you. When you open up that bag next spring, it has potential for about 12, 15 tons an acre. If you only get half of that, the genetic potential was more. So your output got squeezed. You constrained your output. So if we look at it, we understand there's air, oxygen, soil, humus, erosion control involved. We also decide there's big minerals like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur. And there's also calcium and magnesium. We understand ratios. We understand where they all belong. If you got one of those in limitation and one in excess, you've got a constraint. We know what levels we need to look for in the plant. You also got your financial services up there. And then you got your micronutrients, zinc, copper, iron, manganese, boron, molybdenum, chloride, nickel, cobalt, silica. And so then we got our soil amendment strategies, and we got our soil microbes and our earthworms, and then we got our plant food, our foliar foods, our fulvic, our humic, our silic in here, and then we got our seedbed preparation, all our equipment. We even got bees for pollination. So if everything is working perfect on here, if you're not doing all that perfectly out here and not managing that, because then we go back here to cover crops, we get involved in plant protection, and we get back to getting ready for the next year and how we store it. See, we got our crop rotations, our cover crops, and our conservation tillage. If you get all of those things working and you follow around the people that are really successful, as I get a chance to do, you see, I think we got that figured out. That theory of constraint, I think, is spot on. Now, the details might be different, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, we don't need any magic bugs. We don't need a lot of tests to figure that out. So I was going to talk about rules out here. Now, while you can see this, see, way back years ago, I got to playing around in this biological farming, and I wrote the rules to biological farming. Now, our Nrcs, our National Research Conservation Service, wrote their rules to soil health. So actually, my rules to biological farming, they're all in my book. You know, look, I want to test and balance your soil. Yes, I got to put some chemistry with this. Otherwise, you're throwing a shot in the dark. I don't need to test every year, every acre. In fact, we can do grid sampling. I don't even do that. I got to get some. If I want to, I got to get it started. So I just want to sample. We might sample every 5, 10 acres, and I sample every 3 to 5 years. If you sample every year, you got a bad concept in your head. You think it changes that fast, and it doesn't. So once I got a soil test, what's a soil test about? I'm going to add what's short. And if I got enough, I'm not going to add any more. It's not about creating a perfect soil test. If you got way high in magnesium, you can spend the rest of your life trying to change that, and you might never achieve it. Why don't you just live with it? We live on dolomitic limestone soil. Our soil is naturally high in magnesium, and you are not going to get rid of it. If you think so, you come to Wisconsin and buy a farm, and bring a lot of money with you, and I'll show you how you're not going to get rid of it. Then, I want to use fertilizers which do the least damage. I didn't say they did any damage. And watch the salts and ammonias. I want to use a balance of all nutrients and balance the soluble to sold release. Fertilizer is sold on solubility. See, my grandfather bought a fertilizer, an NPK called a 3-12-12. And my dad then bought a 6-24-24. And now we got a 9-23-30. So every time we improved the numbers on fertilizer, we threw out a lot of the goodies. We made it all water soluble. And then we wonder why it's in our water. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So that's because it's all how it was sold. So that's why people get hung up on those numbers. I want some to be timed release. The plant's got to eat every day. I tell people, if you got your dairy farms, you got a calf born today, go home tonight and put all the feed in front of it for the next 3 months and see how well it does. Well, that's how you farm. That's how you want to grow your crops. You just dump it all out there. So then I want to make sure I like homogenized. I control the pH of our fertilizers. I like to put a carbon with them. And I like to place them. And I want homogenized micronutrients. Otherwise, it's hard to put a pound of zinc out there. Pesticides, herbicides, nitrogen, I should say, and biotechnology in minimum amounts and only absolutely necessary. Because they all have side effects. Nitrogen's issues. Herbicides, insecticides, pesticides, like they're fungicides. They're issues. Now, I'm not telling conventional farmers not to use them, but they never make your farm better. I say to the guys come along and say, well, your fertilizer's a little high price. I said, well, because you've been buying the cheapest, saltiest crap you could, and I'm giving you a better fertilizer, and I got all those trace minerals, and they're expensive. And I said, but you're giving your money away now. That's not something that never makes your farm better. When I deliver you minerals, I'm going to make your farm better because they don't go away. I build them up. And so anyway, those things never make your farm better. And then I want to create a maximum diversity with green manure crops and tight rotations. I want to use tillage to control the decay of residues. I'm a real believer in shallow incorporating. Now, you know, because we grow so many row crops in America, we're really big into strip till or zone till. I think we got the same problem everybody else does in the world. 40% of the land is owned by somebody that doesn't even live near the farm, and they rent it out. So nobody wants to fix rented land. So we take on rented land, we rent it for 7 years, 2 years to fix it and 5 years to farm it. We've never lost a piece of land yet. We only signed one contract the first time. And in those 7 years, we just keep right on farming it. No, but we fix their land. They can't believe what we'll do to fix their land. So, but anyway, zone tillage is a way to have a conventional farm, rented farm, and get the maximum use out of your dollar as fast as you can, because now we got a little strip in the ground about 10 inches wide, and we put our concentrated nutrients down in that little zone. So if you buy, there was a farm in Michigan that went broke last year. I got to evaluate it because I work with all these investors, and it was 100,000 acres, and he went bankrupt. And I said to him, he conventionally tilled 100,000 acres with chisel plows and worked it to death. And I said, wow. I said, nobody's doing this anymore. I said, what about minimum tillage? Oh, I said, I get too much soil variation. It's too hard to teach everybody. He said, we just do everything the same. We just chisel. I said, why did you go to strip till? You can do that little zone in there. Oh, he said, I tried it. My yield went backwards. I said, what are you putting in that zone? If you take commercial fertilizer and you put it down that zone, you put salts and ammonia, your yields go down. We work with the strip till companies because they like our fertilizer in their zones. Because you can go backwards with strip tilling. But anyway, I like to shallow incorporate, and we run big, deep rippers. And then the last one is I want to feed my soil life, carbon from compost, green manure crops, livestock manures, residues, and I want to apply calcium. Our Nrcs, this is their rules for soil health, minimum disturbance. Maximize soil cover. Fine. Maximum biodiversity. Fine. And maximize presence of living roots. Fine. What's missing? Tillage and minerals. They can't mention minerals. They'd be attacked by every soil science department in North America. I know these guys from soil conservation. Ray Archuleta travels around. He speaks quite a bit. I have a few beers with him myself. And I talk about, I said, what about calcium? What about minerals? They can't bring up minerals because the soil science department owns the minerals world. They can't talk about them. That's a religion. You got to leave that one alone. If you're working with soil conservation, you say, oh, follow any one of those rules. There's nobody going to argue against a single one of those rules. There's nothing wrong with any of those rules, but it's certainly not the whole picture, is it? There's pieces missing. There's more to it than just that. That's why I said we do have this thing figured out. And by the way, how many are organic in here right now? Look, a number of you. It's not a system of farming. It's a system of not doing. I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't do that, I didn't do that. I must be organic. And that's why you organic people have a responsibility to your consumer. They're paying you more because they expect more. Now, I say organic only means three things: clean air, clean water, clean food. There's nothing about nutritional value. There's nothing even about soil erosion in there. You see, it's really about not doing. And of course, if you want to be successful, you better do something. Now, I go to some farms, they're not very good. So anyway, it's not really a farming system at all. It has issues. Nitrogen. You can grow that one. Plant health. That better be trace minerals and better have rotation. You better have healthy soils. Weed control. That's an issue. That's a weed burner right there, by the way. And you got your off years. Everybody says, oh, I can make $3,000 an acre growing maize seed corn. Well, I can't do it every year. That's once every 4 years. My off years growing oats or something, that's why we're going to take those off years. We're not going to grow anything. See, if everybody did what we did on the dairy world and all took all the grain away from the dairy cows, our milk production dropped by 50%. We'd have a shortage of milk and we'd all get paid. See, I met with some very influential people here a while ago because I got investors. My company, they threw $70 million at my company. I'm sold out. I'm out of it. No, I got parts of it left. And they asked me if I was Secretary of Agriculture, what would I do to change agriculture? I said, first I need a bodyguard, and I need to have what I say goes. And this is this. I'm going to tax nitrogen so high that you can't afford to buy it. You will get good at it. And the other thing, I'm going to subsidize your cover crop or your off-season crop. So you make as much money on that. So now I'm taking out 1/3 of the land in North America from corn beans to corn beans, something else. Why not a wheat or something that feeds the world? They don't eat corn and beans. We got piles of corn in the street from last year that never got moved. They're piled in streets out in Dakotas, never sold from last year. And now the harvest is going on this year. Bigger piles in the streets. So I said I can radically change agriculture pretty easily. So transitioning to organic, you can just keep doing what you've been doing and just switch inputs. All the new modern day farmers, all these young kids, I don't want to pick on you young kids, just got your college degree, you're really smart, you came home and You're just going to switch to an organic version. There's organic insecticides, fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, and now they're going to come out with new herbicides. So you can just switch inputs. But boy, oh boy, oh boy. I don't know. You just give your checkbook away. Come on. You don't need to do that. And then I could also put it in hay and small grains. Now if I put it in hay and I sell all the hay, I just sold all the organic matter and minerals for 2 years, and now I'm organic. Isn't that exciting? Or you can do what we do. Just accelerate the system and spend 2 years getting it fixed. And hang on. Now, it works. So soil health. If somebody wanted a definition, here's my definition. Our government calls it the capacity of the soil to function. And I added without intervention. At my age, you see, what's health? Am I healthy? See, I don't go to doctors because I might go, but I do the testing, and I just want to know. I don't take anything. And I'm not saying it's smart. I'm just saying I refuse to take those things because they got side effects, and I refuse to do it. I think everything is solved with nutrition. So I get my blood pressure's a little high, my cholesterol's a little high, and I said to the doctor, just tell me, write on a piece of paper the numbers you want me to have, and I'll be back in 6 months. I didn't say I want to live this way, but I'll give you the numbers you want. I can change my diet. I'm a stubborn old German. So without intervention, if you're intervening, I went to this guy, and he said, last week, he said, I'm 100% no-till. I said, really? Nothing. You're 100% no-till? Yeah. He said, I run a ripper in the fall after my soybeans before corn. I got a deep ripper. And he said, I got a vertical tillage machine. I shred the corn stalks. I run the vertical tillage machine through my maize stalks before I plant soybeans. I said, I thought you were a no-till. Oh, he said, that is no-till. He cheat on no-till just like they cheat on all grass. We're a little annoyed by your golden butter or something. All grass-fed butter, and it's about 40% of the specialty butters in America comes from Ireland, under your label anyway, and we don't think it is what it's supposed to be. You think I don't want you to cheat. I want you to be honest with me. Make sure they're from cows that are out on pasture. Make sure they don't have all the drugs and chemicals in them. I added a few things here, but this is our Nrcs. You don't need a soil test for biology. Is the water soaking in? If the water's not soaking in, I got beautiful pictures, side-by-side farms. The water's got to soak in. It's got to have air. It can't be waterlogged. That's why I was I don't know where I was a while ago, and they want to know if they want to get involved in biological farming. Well, I was down in Missouri, and they read that One Straw Revolution, that book. This guy farms 200,000 acres. It was a Gaylord family, they're very wealthy people, and he took 1,000 acres, but it's all flood irrigated. It's in the Mississippi Delta, and it's clay on it. You couldn't make it here in the back of the room. You got a 100-pound boot. Everyone's full of mud. And I said, you're going to farm this organically? All the land's not suited to farm organically. All the land's not suited to be no-till. Only about 20% of the land in North America is suited to be organic. Well, that old heavy old clay or beach sand, what are you going to do with those? They're not organic farms. Find one that's suited. We're looking at land out in Nebraska. If you want to farm organic and come to America, go to Nebraska, buy irrigated land. That rains about 20 inches of rain. We get 40 where I live. Now I can shut the water off and do my cultivating and planting and turn the water back on. It's the easiest organic farming there is, and there's 6 or 7 different crops you can grow. I also got to cycle my nutrients. What does that mean? Biology and plants. I want you to know where your minerals are and then make sure you're letting them go as you need them for the crop you're growing. Minimum disturbance, we agree with that. What does that mean? You can't have a crust on top of the ground. It can't breathe. That's why we shallow incorporate all those residues. I've been to no-till guys. If you're one of my consultants and you're going to go out to a farm, if you go to a no-till farm, I tell the guys, I got a shovel, let's go take a look. If you go to a guy that's a strip-till farmer, you don't have to go look. Because I know he's creating a strip to plant in. Boy, there's some no-till ground. It's as hard as the floor you're standing on. And yet they all no-till. And the erosion gullies are awful. You can see when they harvest it, they have to drive around the little ravines because they can't drive through them. They've got just big gullies in their field because the ground is hard and dead. And yet they say, well, and they got crust on the ground like you can't even hardly poke through. We got to have a lot of plant diversity. That's why us organic guys do so well with, because we got weeds, as I said. And you got to have living roots. And you got to manage decay of residues. They can't stay there for 3 years. I added the word minerals. Now that covers soil health. So you don't need a test. Just do all those things. Make sure all those things are working for you, and you got soil health. See this? Really interesting. Those are earthworm castings. That's pretty nice looking soil, folks. This is a farm in Iowa. When I was trained with Dr. Albrecht under Brookside Consulting back 40 years ago, when I went to their trainings, they said, nobody talked about cover crops back then. We didn't have the equipment. They said we were dairy farms, and they were always running tight rotations, and they did plow. And by the way, I worked with some really good farms, those horse and buggy farms in Ohio last week that I was at, they plow. But they don't plow very deep or very fast or very often. They're dairy farmers. So I was told you get your minerals right, and everything else will be just fine. So this farm came to one of my winter meetings a couple years. He's been a customer for 20 years. He came to the meeting, he said, my crops are stalled out, my yields. He said, I was 140 bushel corn, and I know you guys don't use bushels like we do. And he said, now 250 to 280 bushel corn. And he said, I'm stalled out. He said, I'm not getting any higher in yield. He said, I'm wondering if I'm putting on enough nitrogen. He said, when I started with you, I was using 140 units of nitrogen, growing 140 bushel corn. That's what the university recommends, 1 bushel per pound of nitrogen. He said, now I'm 250 to 280 bushel corn, and I haven't changed my nitrogen. He said, think I could use a little more nitrogen? I said, well, that's easy to tell. Just side dress a little more. We got to talking. He never has grown a cover crop in his life. That's just because he's got the minerals right. Those beautiful soils are from getting, and double his yields, from just getting the minerals. I said, oh my gosh, why don't you go cover crops? He said, oh, I tried rye once, and it was too hard to manage this guy. I said, we just don't. We just grow corn, beans, and we don't grow cover crops. That was done with just changing soil chemistry. And that's what I was taught 40 years ago. So, what about those things? He quit all that. What about diammonia phosphate, the commercial phosphorus? What about potassium chloride? What about anhydrous ammonia? What about insecticides, fungicides, herbicides? What do they do to help soil health? Well, we know they don't do anything positive. I don't know about your televisions. Our televisions are nothing but drug ads, and then they give all the side effects. If you listen to all the side effects, you would certainly never take any of them. These side effects, salt, soluble nutrients, excess nitrogen, and all those chemicals are your side effects. So soil health is really the capacity to function. It really means organic matter. It does not talk about yield. That's capacity to function. Just because you got soil health does not mean you get high yield, because you got to manage nutrients. You got to manage the release of nutrients. So soil fertility is the maximum level of nutrients that are exchangeable for optimum crop performance. They're two separate things. Soil fertility and soil health are not the same. This is a farm we bought, rented. We rent this one. You can see corn stalks, they had some small grains, and they got this weed as an indicator of tight soils. Foxtail is an indicator of tight soils. Someone mentioned couch grass, or quackgrass as we call it. When we take over land, within 3-4 years it's gone. Velvet leaf is gone, foxtail. Last year we had a lot of foxtail because it rained every day. But quackgrass or couch grass does not survive our farming system. And I don't know what we do. Our tight rotation, maybe it's mad at our equipment. I don't know. It leaves when we show up. That went to that after my 2 years of soil building. Look at that. Went from crusted over, hard, tight ground to this in 2 years. I can change soil. You will not recognize it by just putting all those inputs in there. And 2 years later, that's what I get. So this is also really true. When we got to look, I heard people talking about low input, and I'm not opposed to inputs. I think I want to take money from things that don't make your farm any better. I want to take money from excess soluble nutrients. I want to take money from the negatives. I want to get rid of your negatives, excess tillage, whatever they might be. But I'm not going to be on. I tell you, if I'm going to invest in dollars and stuff, we're high intensive, we're high yield farmers. I refuse to take less yield than conventional farmers on our organic farm. I cannot work with large conventional farms and have half the yield they do because they wouldn't listen to me. See why we're doing, but this is a true study, came out of California. Top producers in yield and profit. They spend 87% of their time searching, testing, researching, learning, always looking for better ways, reducing unnecessary costs, adding dollars that drive yield and quality, investing in quality inputs, seed, fertilizers. It's all about limiting factors and prevention. And 20% of the time, shopping, looking, trying to buy better, and trying to reduce their cost. The least profitable guys spend 80% of the time cutting costs, spending as little as possible, searching for the least inputs, living on the defense. In other words, wait, there's a problem, shows up, and then try to deal with it. Always dealing with problems that arise, and they protect their income through crop insurance in our country. Only 20% of the time improving their farm. And that's a true story. That's a large study of a lot of farms, and I think it's real. Where are you? Are you going after more? Are you reducing velocity? This piece of equipment right here, if you went and bought one of those in America, you'll get my phone number. My company's phone number. You can't put salts and ammonias right down that zone. This was developed by one of our customers. It's called the Soil Warrior strip till machine. See, now with GPS and we can drive really straight. I want to concentrate all my nutrients, all my fertilizer. I really like, actually I really like that machine does. It's very expensive. There's things that make my farm better, and there's things that will prevent disasters. How long did I get to go here? I forgot already. What's that? So this is a 34,000 acre property in South Dakota that's transitioning to organic. It's the largest organic transition that ever took place that we know of on this planet. This is General Mills is involved, and there's investors involved. And it's South Dakota, it's all in one hunk. And it's called the Gunsmoke Farm. And if you old people understand Festus, Doc, Kitty, Gunsmoke, James Arness, maybe you don't. Cowboys, Indian days when I was a kid. So anyway, this whole farm right here is a bunch of investors and people running. It's up in North Dakota, and I wanted to spend the first 2 years getting it. They're not growing conventional crops. They're growing weeds. And they don't have enough, they don't want to spend any money, so they don't even clip the weeds. And then when it's organic in 2 years, oh, it'll be certified organic. Oh, and now my name is plastered all over it. So I just want to tell people, look, if you read the reports that it's doing just terrible, just remember, I'm not the one making the decisions. And financial people are controlling the checkbook, and they refuse to spend any money. They are not getting themselves ready for organic. And so what they decided to do, they couldn't get all the weeds cut. They got cheatgrass, they got kochia, and they got thistles all over this farm. And so they took in this year, they sold 18,000 acres worth of hay at $15 a bale. And I calculated the organic matter and the minerals are worth $60 a bale. And they sold it for $15, but it got the weeds off their farm, they said. I don't know if it did or not. There's a shortage of hay in South Dakota, so they're $15 a bale. So amazing. That is a huge piece of property. So General Mills and the big food companies are all going to put pressure on it, saying all the big food companies are not making money on their old stand. Like General Mills had Pillsbury flour. Nah, that's gone. That's going to go by the wayside. They bought Annie's Organic, and they need 100,000 acres of hard red spring wheat just for Annie's Organic. So we got a contract for 350,000 bushel off of this farm right here, hard red spring wheat from General Mills. That's why the investors bought it. We got a 10-year contract. And so all these companies are really expand. They're looking at Costco in our country as a wholesale food supply thing. It sells a lot of organic. And they are talking about taking all the poultry, 100% organic, in their stores. If they do that, what's Walmart, what are all the other stores going to do? They're going to have to follow suit, aren't they? You know why they're not doing it? Because we're trying to stop the illegal, fraudulent organic stuff coming into America. And they're worried they can't get enough grain to feed those chickens. So how do we get more growers? And then when we got them, how do we get those guys to trust that we got enough that they can get in the game? But anyway, that big project I'm in the middle of, I got to give them some credit. That was their winter wheat. That didn't look too bad. That was soybeans the year before. This is first year transition, so there was no weeds in it the year before. But I said, what are you going to do with it next year? What are you going to do with it now? Still, you're going to grow wheat again? No, we got to grow some nitrogen. We got some legumes out here. As of last week, they were still planting alfalfa. You know why? They got a contract with the guy that sold them the seed that if it doesn't grow, they can give them back free seed. We quit planting about the 10th of September where I live. And they're up in the Dakotas and they're still planting. The ground is starting to freeze. They're still putting alfalfa seed in the ground. It's not going to grow, is it? But they got a guarantee that if the seed doesn't grow, they get free seed back. Okay, yes. This is another piece of land I want to bring up for the guys that like to just do cover crops and build soil. I was in England. They offered me $1,000 a tree. I had 40 acres worth of Christmas trees that are 25 feet tall. I can't give them away. Nobody wanted them. So I said, my grandparents would roll over in their grave. We cleared that 40 acres in 7 days with our bulldozer and our skid steer with the grapple hooks on it. So this has been pine trees and set aside for 25 years. It grew those big trees on it. So my son here, we just bulldozed them into piles, and then we burned them, and we cleared this land. What do you think the soil looked like after 25 years of sitting there? Is it all fixed and loose and crumbly and full of minerals? Absolutely not. Phosphorus single digit, potassium single digit, pH is 5.5. Those pine trees made that soil acid. They certainly didn't fix it. It wasn't fixed chemically, it wasn't fixed biologically. And it sat idle, it was no-tilled for 25 years. Why didn't it fix itself? It didn't. So why didn't it extract more minerals from the soil? It couldn't, they aren't there. Even if it could. If I could put lots of minerals on in the front, maybe it could have got started. So anyway, we burned it and we cleared it. So anyway, I'm after those healthy kind of soils. So your farmer's job, to put another way, is balancing those soil minerals. And Joel mentioned today, maximizing photosynthesis. And the American farmer thinks that's putting more plants per acre. No. It's about having healthy, wide leaves with lots of magnesium to capture as much sun as you possibly can and to be able to stop the disease and have the open flow and file them down through the plant so the nutrients can flow up and down. And have enough boron to move the sugars. Is maximizing photosynthesis. It's not more plants. Manage air and water, and manage crop residue decomposition, and improve and feed soil biology. I'm just going to go a little bit through a soil test and see. I talked about a biology test. There's about 13 different elements we test, but there's 70 elements known to grow crops. When we bring in a natural rock phosphator, we take a product we get out from Las Vegas called Sulphur Plus. It's got a 2.9 pH. It's real high in nickel, selenium, and silica. We use that as a base to put our trace minerals in. So we're organic and we can't use conventional fertilizers. We can use any mineral anybody else can. So we can take Humates, which have a 3.4 pH, they're very acidic. We can take this Sulphur Plus, which is a 2.9 pH. We can add our powder fine trace minerals to it. And we can also take, that's how we make soluble calcium. Take lime and put on a low pH soil and you'll have calcium availability. Because the acidity, uses the carbonate to neutralize your soil. And you get free calcium. What if you put lime on a neutral pH soil? It's insoluble. It ain't gonna break down. What if you added some acid to it, like a humate to it before? That's how we manufacture fertilizers. So this one here, this is a farm I bought, and I got soil testing down to just 4 simple questions. What type of soil is it? Now, how do you figure that out? That's organic matter, about 2% organic matter. That's CEC, about 10%. That's cation exchange capacity. That's clay and humus, a medium light soil, and my pHs are in the 7s. Everybody's, oh, you should have a 6.5 pH. I said, anything less than 7, you're missing minerals. The only advantage to having a low pH is if you got dead soils, you have more minerals show up. If you got live soils, and if you're organic, you're going to struggle to have pHs low. Don't believe the stupid story you got to have a low pH. I work with guys who got 8 pHs. The only difference is you have to replace biology with chemistry. If your pHs are above 7, you have to have biology giving you the mineral availability. You don't need your pH at 6.5. That's a joke. That's a lie. That's not a true story. That only occurred with chemistry. So I now know what my soil pHs are. If that pH, like Joel mentioned that this morning, that pH was 5, the rest of the numbers on the soil test are useless. If that pH was 9, the rest of the soil numbers on this thing are useless. The soil test is, if it's got to be around 7 to have any value, the numbers. Just remember that. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff is useless. I got to look at P's and K's. I like my potassium levels 3 to 5%. Look at phosphorus. P1 is the readily available, and P2 is the reserve. The university says 25 and 50. Everybody's fighting phosphorus. Phosphorus is the good guy. He's not the bad guy. He's the good guy. He's what makes your plants healthy. Just because you got a high soil test doesn't mean you get into plants, because this farm was not functioning well until we started doing cover crops and changed how they farmed it. The university says 25 and 50. 100, 125, 125, 127, 186, 187. Perfect. We're not in the government programs because they would stop us from trying to farm this. So I just quit the government programs. They have no right. I'm fighting, he mentioned Dwayne Beck, someone did, I think that Robbie did, out in Dakota. I got enough argument with Dwayne Beck, he's all no-till. And I said, no-till? He said, these ranges, the prairies are never tilled. And I said, that's not true, the wolves tilled them. And then they all laugh at me. I said, oh, the wolves herded the bison. And then the bisons stomped and peed and pooped. And they shallow incorporated residues. And they did the tillage of our prairies. The wolves used the bison as the tool. And that's how the prairies got reestablished. And so that's not no-till. Now, the bison's got a different shaped hoof than a cow. Cows cause a lot of compaction. But anyway, that's why the government programs here, this phosphorus thing is just misleading. So this farm right here has got extremely high phosphorus, and we like it. Where's my calcium magnesium? These are 18 on magnesium, or 17, 18, and 75, 77 on calcium. That was all done with chicken manure, laying hen manure. Our normal soils are 30 on magnesium and 55 on calcium. I bought this farm, I rented for these guys, rented for 25 years. It was right next to 100,000 laying hens about a half mile down the road, and they just dumped the chicken manure on this farm. They got calcium a little bit high, so it's not that they got rid of the magnesium. So anyway, they're in really good shape, but after all that manure, after all those years, the trace minerals are terrible. Just because you're putting on manure, you're not getting enough trace minerals. Boron sucks. It's really to the bottom of the barrel. Your trace minerals are really marginal. Zinc is really too low. Manganese is really low. Copper is marginal. Boron's exceptionally low. And iron is plenty high because it normally is in our soils. I wrote the word uniformity. You dairy farmers in there, that's really valuable to you. Unless you have every soil test on every field looking exactly the same, doing feed tests is a joke on your farm. Because if one test is really high and the other's is really low, the guy takes a feed test and he goes and does a ration, and he does the ration based on what you used to feed, not what you're going to be feeding. Think about that. And if you're now, this field's got much higher or different analysis than that field, the reason to have uniformity if you're a dairy farm, then your feed test, and only then can your feed test be of value to you. Soil test doesn't tell where those nutrients are plant available. Soil does not test where the biology is. You can see and smell and look at that. It does not tell if it's loose and crumbly, and does not tell you if the microbes can breathe. And Joel brought this up too. Phosphorus is converted to insoluble phosphorus in hours of application. That's why we would just as soon use a rock phosphate put into a compost pile. This is our facilities, and years ago we had NPK. And then we started looking at all these different things out here. We went from diammonium phosphate to monoammonium. We went, instead of urea, we used ammonium sulfate and environmentally smart nitrogen. We manufactured some fertilizer. I didn't want to use all soluble phosphorus, so we used natural rock phosphate. I didn't want to use potassium chloride, so we used potassium sulfate and K-Mag. That large 200,000 acre farm in Eastern Europe, they took that over when the Iron Curtain came down and rented it for $25 an acre for 25 years. Guess what? And now with Brexit, they're not sure if they're going to get their government checks, and The land rent just went to $150 an acre. 25 years are up. It's now they're going to have to learn how to farm. I thought you guys are all better farmers than we were in America until I started coming over here. See, if you don't get a government subsidies, you get really good at this thing. You have no choice, you're going to sink. So what did they switch? I had that young lady come over, 200,000 acres. What's the first thing they switched? They went from DAP to MAP. They went from potassium chloride to potassium sulfate. And they started using molasses, sugar. We make a sugar product from QLF out of the UK. They started using the sugars in the molasses. That's a huge change on 200,000 acres. All those moves are in the right direction. They're not, tillage isn't done yet, cover crops aren't done yet, but they grow a variety of different crops. Then we got our liquid fertilizers, and then we got our different calcium sources. So you can take anything up. You see, commercial fertilizers sold on solubility, except those fresh animal manure and young green plants. Someone mentioned today that animal manure's got a lot of soluble nutrients in it. Might have been Joel. Young green succulent things are highly digestible and highly soluble. Compost, mature plants are slow release. Organically, you can use anything, any mineral on the chart you can use, but you got to use different sources. Most of them you have to use are these slow release things like rock phosphates and lime you can use, but you can actually use organic cal is organic and it's soluble because we add that humates and calcium sulfate and other things too to make it soluble. Potassium sulfate is more slow release than potassium chloride, so I can take anything on that list, anything. And I think Joel mentioned it and maybe Robbie did also. Many of the soluble fertilizers are going to be slowed down, stabilized with carbon. Molasses, sugars work well in the liquids, or humates should be on there. Compost, humates, and manures work well with dry. The reason you took a soil test is you took the soil test, so you divide out over at least 3 years, and it's all about soil correction. Your crop fertilizers, your foliars, your liquids, your starters, and things down the road, they provide nutrients above and beyond what your soil can dish out. When you're doing soil testing, you're looking at this and only this. You can help decide a little bit about that, but you're making the corrections. Anything that's short, add, and eventually you'll get your soils in balance, or as best you can. And you can look at what nutrients are leaving the farm, how do I replace them? That's my liquid fertilizer kind of a thing out here. And there's a link to carbon in all our nutrients. This is our Nrcs thing, and carbon links all our minerals together. And so calcium is the king of all minerals kind of thing out here. It changes the soil structure. I already talked about that's a key to soil health. This year is on our farm, our neighbor's farm, and he had alfalfa lucerne in here, and we dumped a pile of calcium right here. And insects came along, aphids, and just destroyed the field, but not right there. Because he said, how come it didn't work the rest of the field? And I said, because we didn't put that much on. We had to live with this budget. Eventually, I'll get the whole field to look like that. And the diseases and insects won't be there. See, what happened when leafhoppers or aphids come through our country, they don't wipe out everybody's field. If we go to livestock, we had a discussion a little earlier. I work in the UK. I work with a guy that had 30% of his cows have TB. Here's another farm over there. See, they're in the UK, they can use antibiotics on organic farms. We can't in America. And they said, oh, you're going to farm without antibiotics. I said, I'm sorry, we got 2,000 organic dairy farms, and none of us have a need for antibiotics. So Will is down to 4% of his cows. He milks 1,000 cows in England. 4% have TB. And another farm I'm on got 30% with TB. It's not because he got more badgers on his farm. It's because he's got a different immune system. Every plant can protect itself. Any animal can protect itself, given the opportunity and the proper nutrition. That's what this is here. See, my calcium sources, I use, if you got a low pH, lime. If you got a high pH, you got too much magnesium, use gypsum as your salt corrector. If you got a neutral pH and your calcium levels are fine on the salt test, then you use a soluble calcium. And we would take and put some humates with it, or on the conventional world, we burn lime. Hydrated burnt lime is what we use, and we put sulfur with it to buffer it out. So I can choose my calcium source, what I want, and make that a workout here. And this, I think Robbie talked about this simulator. This one here has got a deionized water. Put gypsum on the soil in the morning, and by the afternoon, the water coming off that field was clear. It changed the soil structure. The only 2 minerals you can add to a soil. Now, you organic guys, if you're problem with weeds and you got too much grass pressure, when you get right before you get ready to plant your small grain, you go out and bulk spread a calcium source. 700-800 pounds an acre of gypsum or a hydrated lime, some kind of lime source, right on top of the ground. You will cut down on your weed pressure. We got guys doing it all the time. Because calcium and sulfur on the surface of the soil, you can't work it in. You have to do it right before you plant or after you plant. Right on top of the ground, lay it, and you'll have less weed pressure. That's what that's showing right there. Better soil structure, better holding capacity, water penetration, better tilth. And we get that solid stem in alfalfa. You livestock guys, the University of Minnesota is now figuring out that's pectins. There is no pectin test. Pectins are something that you can almost taste yourselves. You can digest pectins. So if you put a lot of potassium on, I was on a farm down in Mexico, and they had a field of hay. In the first 20 feet, the insects weren't bothering, and the rest of the field they were. And I went and cut it off, and see, there was near a gravel road. Driving down the road, the dust from the road put enough calcium out there that the insects, they were low on calcium. Every stem was completely hollow. If you got a hollow stem on your alfalfa, you're too high in potassium, you're too low on calcium, and you will have insect pressure in your crop, and you have lost a ton of energy. That's all about energy. So this is on an alfalfa breeding station, and we put a ton of our BioCal on it. This is not organic. This station doubled its yield on lucerne, and no insecticides, no herbicides, no fungicides, and it's a conventional alfalfa research farm. They don't have disease and insect problems anymore. So weeds, diseases, and insects out here, this is really, really interesting to me. Probably that's one of our farms. See this little foundation right here? There was a town hall sitting here, and I repossessed it from the township because they were in violation of our contract. They had leased it for 99 years. We bought the farm, and the township built a new shed on another piece of property. And so I took the old town hall, and my wife and I moved it down to another piece of land, and we restored it. The stage is now the kitchen, and we restored this old town hall. It's been there for 104 years. So this is a mowed lawn and a driveway. It's a township property. And I moved the town hall, and these are the weeds that came up last year. They've been laying there for 100 years waiting for the right condition to grow. And the rain came. I do not know what those weeds are, by the way. Someone said it looks like mare's tail. We don't have, I said, I'm not going to let them spread. But isn't that amazing? They've been waiting. When the rain came, they grew. They've been laying there 100 years waiting for this day. So if you think you can wait long enough to get rid of all your weeds or keep flushing them out with more tillage, you're probably making a mistake. You're going to have weeds. It's how you, if you put a lot of raw manure on your farm, you're going to probably have more weeds because you just fertilize them. Not the manure doesn't have weed seeds in it. You fertilize what was out there. This is at the University of Wisconsin. That's all GMO corn back there because we did research. We didn't want GMO, so this is silage corn. That's our fertilizer. See how much greener it is? See how brown that is? You can see the difference on that. That's our green stuff. That's our trace mineral mix out here. And so when we put the trace minerals on, we actually stop the fungal diseases. University of Wisconsin research on a conventional farm. That's organic trace minerals. It's got humates, zinc, manganese, iron, copper, bore, and it's got that sulfur plus with the nickel and selenium and cobalt and all those natural minerals in them. There's several deposits in the world we like, so that was quite significant. This is up in Canada. This is Gerber baby food. They wanted some organic baby food. And this guy's a spray right along Lake Erie, so they're spraying a fungicide every 5 to 7 days. And this one's certified organic right next door. Conventional, organic. Now, people got it mixed up when they go up there. They think that other one was organic and this is conventional. Oh, no. What do you think they did? Huge levels of trace minerals are your health and your stimulation in your plant. They are your health minerals. I need my calcium and I need my trace minerals. And so that's a heavy dose of our trace minerals. So you put some potassium sulfate on. I got to make sure I have sulfur. There's 3 or 4 tons of compost out. They don't skimp. And they foliar sprayed it with compost tea and milk. Why milk? Because the price is so lousy, you might as well put it out in your soil. But if you spray it with milk, you coated the leaf with milk, and then it smells stinky and rotten. And it's already got bugs growing on it from the milk. So the fungal diseases can't land and take over. That's my theory. It might be a joke, but it's my theory. One thing for sure, they didn't destroy its crop, did they? This is wheat in North Dakota. This is where we put our fertilizer on, and these guys don't grow very good wheat. They don't get much rain. See that over there is kind of diseased? This is maximizing photosynthesis. That's 50 pounds an acre. Right down the tubes on that wheat. That's about 15 pounds of a trace mineral mix. That's ammonium sulfate and some phosphorus. That's all it is. 50 pounds an acre at most because they don't have much of a budget. That was 8 bushel more wheat per acre in a ground that grows about 40 bushel wheat. But you see, now we got better expression of photosynthesis. We wiped those diseases out. And we had some other crops up there. We showed much bigger leaves. That's zinc. So all these trace minerals have a function. This is poultry manure. We're not opposed to putting on, we got a litter spreader to put on poultry manure. We're not opposed to putting on poultry manure. I think it's actually pretty good. But you got to look at your manure. It's really simple. Poultry manure is corn, soybeans, and lime run through a chicken. Dairy manure is fed hay. Horse manure hasn't even started to digest yet because they don't do very good. They don't have, it's mostly just as it was before you fed it to them. It didn't do much changing. But this is pretty good. That's a nice soluble calcium. We think that's calcium nitrate. That's a really good fertilizer. So you're getting down to my time? No. Well, I'll just say, so anyway, I can also have this thing about making compost. If I'm going to pick on something, let's just do them all already. Let's get them over with. I'm not a big guy on perfect compost. I said there's no such thing as perfect rotting. I was in China, and there was a dead mouse in the motel, and it smells exactly like the dead mouse in my house in Wisconsin. How could that be? A rotting mouse smells the same no matter where he is on this planet. How can that be possible? So everything rots. Is there a perfect rotting? Someone came up with a perfect rotting test. How could that be? What about spreading manure and growing oats? What about putting your manure out there and then sucking it up into the oats? Oats has killed more cows than any feed we ever fed them. You know why? Because it's so good at sucking up nutrients. It grows really well on low fertility. You put enough manure out there, grow oats, and feed it to your dry cows and watch them die. Sucks up nitrates like it's coming out of a straw. So I don't mind we don't call it compost anymore. We call it stacked age manure, because in our world, if you call it compost, you got to prove you made it. Just call it SAM, stacked age manure. I brought on these investors. This is really not to do with organic. It is that we got a $600,000 USD grant to come up with an organic version of this. See, we take, this is on a large farm, see, we got huge problems in America, these large farms, and they all got a manure problem. I met about 10 years ago, I met some researchers at Utah State University that came up with a system to precipitate the minerals out of manure. And so this manure goes from 15,000 cow dairy farm, Fair Oaks, Indiana, south of Chicago, and they have 800,000 visitors a year come through this farm. You get on a bus, you go right down the feed alleys of the bus, 15,000 cows on 10,000 acres. Guess what? Oh, the manure load on that land is unbelievable. They'll never, ever spread another pound of manure on that farm. It's all they get a little bit of liquid that's got nitrogen and potash in it. So we take the feed, run it through a cow, collect the manure, the feed's in a cow for 48 hours, then it goes to the anaerobic digester for 2 to 3 weeks. I'd rather be 3 weeks. What comes out of the digester is pretty well all digested. The only thing left is fiber and water. We take the water out, we separate the fiber, and we add other minerals in it, and we granulate it. We take it through a machine that takes out, we precipitate with a polymer out the minerals. But that's not certified organic. That's what our grant is, to come up with an organic polymer, precipitate out the minerals. And I tell the people, they all laugh at me. I say, why don't we take our polymer and feed it to the cow in a capsule that she can't digest, and when the manure comes out, we run it through a roller and bust that capsule. Because when it comes out of the cow, you can feed anything you want to the cow. It's when it comes out that it's sacred. It seems like a joke, doesn't it? Anyway, that is going to revolutionize agriculture in America as we know it. These big farms will no longer spread manure. You know what the problem with this is? They can now get bigger. I solved their manure problem. The first one is right here. We got $20 million into this facility, and we got 1 year of failures so far. But I hate being the first guy, but I don't see anybody lined up to be the first guy. And so now the next 10 big farms in North America are already lined up to put this technology on their farm. We're making 3 products, a calcium product, and we're making a generic product, and we're making a high trace mineral product. So our Terra New technology, we call it, it's a biological. If you guys got computers, go online and look up something, The Old Man and the Secret. It comes out of Texas. 1953, this guy patented a biological. Guys paid $20 an acre to buy this biological, developed by Shell Oil Company, to clean up after oil spills. And what it is? Cattle paunch bugs from a cow's gut, sea salts, and yeast. So now, this stuff's coming out of the digester. All we got is dead bodies of bugs. It's 5% humic acid. And it's got all these dead bodies of bugs in it. It's got some plant growth regulators in there. It's got a bunch of enzymes in it because they're all dead bodies of bugs. It's got plant protective compounds in there. It's got food for biology. It's got extra minerals such as selenium. They feed a pound of mineral cow a day. So we're actually going to change, now we add all the other minerals to it to make those different fertilizers. And so we got this different carbon matrix. So everything, that's all hooked with carbon. And the other thing we've done out here, we hooked up with QLF. Is QLF in Ireland? Quality Liquid Feeds? They're in England. They got partners in England, and we took that over to the Eastern Europe, and Will Boone, there's a couple of biological guys in England that are working with this thing. And so numbers of years ago, I was never in the liquid business. I'm a believer, if the soils are right, and if you got the right kind of soil, you shouldn't have to foliar feed it, you shouldn't have to do anything to it. If I've got every bite of food that goes in this body is perfect and wonderful and balanced and full of minerals, and I don't have any pesticides or chemicals in it, I shouldn't have to take food supplements. Tell me who eats that way. We just had lunch, what do you think? I take supplements. A lot of guys in the liquid business, so we take all fertilizers, and I don't mind putting humates in liquids. We take molasses and sugar in liquids. We had incredible results. We're on about 1 million acres now. We 50% growth every year because it doesn't cost the farmer any money. He takes out some of his liquid nitrogen, put some molasses in. Take out some of your liquid starter fertilizer, put molasses in. Take out some of all your additives you do in your tank to make your sprays work. Molasses has got a low pH, put molasses in. Your sprays won't drift. You'll have better control on weeds, and so we've had a lot of success with that thing. And the other thing that's going to change, now I think I'll probably have to end with this, we got a new starter made with MKP, it's monopotassium phosphate. It's the same stuff that's in I think it's in, not Mountain Dew, it's in Gatorade. Read the label on Gatorade, you're drinking it, if you're drinking Gatorade. But it's a way to deliver potassium and phosphorus, because phosphorus wants, so the future is, everybody said, Do you use a starter fertilizer or not? See, in South Dakota, I wanted them to put liquid on that planter, right down those tubes, right down that seed. This dry land farming, 15 inches of rain a year is all they get. I'm going to fix your soil starting right next to the seed. Why not put a biological in there? I'm not going to poke spit a biological with a helicopter across your farm. I'm going to put it right where I want it. So this now is like a colostrum mix that you would feed a calf. Biologicals, kelp, molasses, fish. How about putting, I could put some different trace minerals in there. I could put a little magnesium down that furrow. I could put a cocktail mix. That's not fertilizer. Fertilizer needs to be built on your soil, so that I want to dribble that really close to your seed as a biological seed stimulant, root development kind of things. So I want to get that in that little circle. This here is, whoops, get back there. This here is 12 days after planting on a maize crop. That's our terra-fed molasses with some kelp in it. Kelp comes from South Africa, and that's about a double root system you're going to see on a normal crop. Now you get a bigger root system. I think Robbie mentioned that. Your double root system cuts your water and fertilizer in half. That's why I like zone tails. You can't grow rich in hard, tight ground. You can't grow rich in too many soluble fertilizers. Let's do things to change that. We can change it starting at the seed for very little dollars. I was in Australia, and the guy said, dry land farming. I said, what's your budget? He said, $5 an acre. And I said, wow, man, let's go to the bar and have a beer and forget about it. No, what do you think he did? Right down that row, he put a biological. Right down on top of the seed. See, that's your best shot. That's your best shot. So, anyway, regenerative agriculture, that's a new movement starting out here. That's about cover crops, and they got to have livestock and compost. And they want to be 100% no-till. They aren't going to be organic, are they? That's our Gabe Browns and Dave Brants and all those guys out here. But they see they don't do minerals. And that's Rodale Institute, but they want to do compost. And why do you have to have livestock? Because who's going to till? If you're not going to do tillage, who's going to get rid of their cover crops? They graze them all winter long. This is North Dakota with 20 inches of rain and it's frozen every day of the year, except for 2 in the summer. This is Brendan Rocky. This is Colorado, cover crops. See, that's his cover crop. What are you going to do with that? You're going to no-till into that? You're going to spray it with herbicides? He worked it back in the ground. This is the guy, 1 year potatoes, 1 year cover crop. It says nitrogen building. It's nutrient storage. It's time released on your fertilizer. I want my minerals in there. I sent you out to take a soil sample into that crop right there. You're not going to measure the soil minerals, are you? That crop is loaded with minerals. All you're going to measure what's left in the soil. You got to be careful on soil testing. When's a good time to do it? Maybe in the fall after harvest. You got to be really careful. Don't you ever go take a soil sample when there's a beautiful crop growing on the land, because they should have sucked up minerals. Erosion control should be sequestering carbons and building organic matter. It should be insect control, disease prevention. It should be building up my soil resilience, and it should be increasing water holding capacity, and it should be weed control. If you don't take advantage of everything of that cover crop, yes, it's costing you money. I heard someone say cover crops are expensive. My friend in Iowa spends $70 an acre on cover crops. He says, look what I get for $70. He's an organic farm. He's one of my consultants. We're in the same boat. We want to out-yield our conventional neighbors. How much are you willing to spend for all that? They buy fertilizer, insecticides, fungicides, pesticides, and biotechnology and spend a whole lot more than $70 an acre. 70 is extreme, but this guy's rich. Whoops, I gotta go back. See this? That's what's in that cover crop. That's mustard. That's why it's a biofumigant. 3-to-1 nitrogen to sulfur ratio. That stinks like rotten eggs. Look at all those minerals that are in that mustard. Now, that mustard was already fairly mature. If I take it down younger, I wouldn't have as much minerals, but he's growing potatoes on here. No herbicides, no insecticides, no fungicides, and 20 units of nitrogen. His neighbors are putting on 200 units of nitrogen. But 1 year soil building and 1 year cover crops. And then he puts a ton of compost per acre. That's his whole fertilizer program. So it's all about catch and release. Plants catch the nutrients. Biology breaks those nutrients down. We got some carbon added in there. We got some minerals going into the thing. And then we release them over here, and you see what happens. Isn't that cute? And then, of course, our mob grazing, the reason they got to have cattle is they got to stomp and pee and poop, and they got to eat that residue. We talked about no livestock farming. We all got livestock are just out there on the land. We just got to learn how to feed them. Don't put it on the other side of that fence. So I think that's why I got my humus out. I think I'll quit at that point. Oh, I got to show you one more thing. I'm sorry about that. My time is probably up. I got a little time yet, right? I talked about feeding your soils like you feed your cows. You don't need to test these things. This is really simple. Bacteria are the most abundant creatures on this earth, and they eat the easy to digest stuff. They're not fungal. Organisms eat fungal food. It's complex carbons. Everybody thought we had to have this complex carbons, and Joel brought that up today. It'll take another generation before it sinks in what he brought up. The liquid exudates from the soil plants are what building your humus in your soil, not the stuff you add. It's not the stalks, it's not the residues. When you grow bacteria food, they got a 5-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. The protozoa, they live 20 minutes. The protozoa and the bacteria eat fungus, eat them, and the protozoa and other things eat them, and they're a 20-to-1. So I said, when they eat that 5-to-1, guess what? The manure coming out of that guy is really high in nitrogen. And that's how we get nitrogen. You see, that's why it can be grass or it could be lignin. So I did this. I divided down. There's an old guy, 90 years old, an old chemistry teacher in Michigan. I just saw him the other day, 92 or 90. He's still farming, because he said if I quit farming, they'll probably be burying me, because it's all development land he's on, right in the middle of the city limits of Alma, Michigan. I went to his farm one day, and he's really involved in carbon sequestering. He said, I want to show you my brown carbon. Boom, I got it. If it's brown, it's fungal food, and it could be turning into black, and it could be building organic matter. If it's green, it's bacteria food, and it's fertilizer. It's fertilizer. I don't care if it's a grass. There's no such thing as legume credits. This is on our farm. The first year I bought that farm with that high salt test, corn was yellow, starved. Foxtail grew, that's a Hampshire hog. We hogged it down. We couldn't even harvest it. 2 years later, there we are. It's all about releasing what was out there. There was lots of things in there. This is putting on sugar. They put side-dress sugar, molasses. That's cultivation on corn. The son forgot to turn the applicator on, but he didn't tell his dad. And so that was, he had 17 bushel more corn on the hillside, 35 down here than he did, but forgot to put the sugar on. This is that potato grower out in Idaho, the highest quality potatoes in the state of Idaho. Wheat potatoes. Everybody else putting on 250 units a night, 20. Someone went to his farm and said, oh, you got to use some sugar. You fool your feed some sugar. It's all irrigated. Fool your feed some sugar out here. And he said, your potatoes turn green. So he started putting on a couple pounds of dextrose. Nothing. Then I used the moron theory. I put more on. Farmers are good at that. And now they got to tighten their belt. He said, when I got to 10 pounds of sugar a week, 250 pounds of sugar during the growing season, I just kept backing down the nitrogen, and my crop got healthier. Highest quality seed potatoes in the state of Idaho. He doesn't want anybody to tell anybody what he's doing because he doesn't want to lose his status. When you started getting paid for quality, you'll hide what you're doing. I'm working that one there. That's bacteria food. That's going to be a corn crop. And that's what's in that crop, 200 units of nitrogen. But because it's that young succulent stuff feeding bacteria, that's why we think we enter the growing season with over 300 units and all those minerals in a highly soluble fertilizer form that are in that alfalfa, 2.5 tons an acre. Are in that little crop, roots and all, putting back in that soil. See, that's where I want your minerals, in a carbon biological cycle. This is Penn State University. They had hairy vets growing in here. And they said, we don't understand. I went at their field days, and of course I can't keep my mouth shut, but I'm at their field days, and they said, we don't understand. We had a hairy vetch crop in there, and we had the most nitrogen credits on the vetch. And over here, we had a young clover crop with only a whole lot less nitrogen credits, and that one's green and this one's yellow. What's going on? We don't understand. And I said, well, one's indigestible. If you took hairy vetch, you'd let your alfalfa get really ripe and all headed out. You'll have the most nitrogen credits per acre. Try to feed it to a cow and get milk. It's the same. What they forgot to understand is the word digestibility. I don't need the tons. I wanted to feed bacteria. They fed fungus. This is another farm in Idaho. 8.5 pHs. It's called Snowville. Such high levels of salt they couldn't grow crops. They get irrigated and they fertilize the cover crop. And all the nutrients come through the compost pile. We put rock phosphate into that compost pile. The cheapest source of phosphorus is rock phosphate. You got Morocco phosphate? Put it in the compost pile, folks. Compost is what breaks down those nutrients. It's the cheapest source of phosphorus, and now becomes a time release, and the gypsum. So they never grew over 300 sack potato crop, and now we're up over 500 and 600 sacks an acre because we bypass those soils because there's no way you can fix them. That's going to be soybeans. It's our farms. And the tillage, thoughtful disturbance of the land. This is on our farm. See all the residues on top? We have row cleaners. We plant in furrows. And we started rolling and crimping and no-tilling soybeans. Everybody wants to talk about this. It's a failing farm system. And see, the soybeans do not grow very well under that rolled rye. It's got an inhibitory effect. They just do lousy in there. And this is University of Wisconsin. That's where they rolled and crimped rye. Here's where they cultivated. And there's always a 10 bushel difference. So every paper talks about how great it is to roll and crimp the rye and plant beans into it. But the yields are 10 bushel less. And 10 bushel at $20 a bushel is $200 an acre. I'm sorry, we did it for 4 years and finally quit. This out in, these are heterite from the heterite colony. And anyway, yes, you see, what's your number one yield limiting factor? It's not nitrogen, it's carbon dioxide. The guy that grew the 500 bushel corn made a really profound statement. He said, in order to grow 500 bushel corn, you got to follow 500 bushel corn because you need the carbon dioxide. They split their nitrogen out 5 times. You go to greenhouses in Canada, they inject carbon dioxide. The giant pumpkin growers all use dry ice for carbon dioxide. You see here, this plant's not built upside down. The stomata on the bottom of the leaf. So when you work these residues in the ground, and then they start to digest and they start boiling off carbon dioxide, our trouble with the environment is we're putting on nitrogen and we're tilling the ground and releasing the carbon dioxide at the wrong time. You ought to be releasing it when the plant can use it. Putting on your nitrogen and splitting it out. Boiling off carbon dioxide is the #1 yield limiting factor. And that, you go into a big maize field in America in the middle of the summer, carbon dioxide meters read 0. Soil's dead, there's no carbon left to boil off. And that's why our environment's in trouble and our crop isn't what it should be. Fence post rots off there, and that's why I want to do my shallow tillage. And you guys that are grazers, I wanted to run my deep, that's a yeoman plow. I want to run my deep rippers because cows do a lot of compaction. We got everything on our farm now. We're all 30 feet wide. We're 12-row equipment. We're trying to run wheel track farming, so we're always driving the same wheel tracks because we do have heavy, big equipment, and we don't know any other way around it except putting wheel track farming in place. So that's my yeoman plow. Why limit the hand that feeds you? I like this one. Nature is not more complex than we think. It's more complex than we can think. We can't even think that complex. So why even bother? Know the principles and the rules. And that was my story. So I hope you got it all. And thank you very much. And that's